Mason lived alone in a modest two-bedroom house tucked at the edge of a sleepy Oregon town. The kind where people nodded at each other, but rarely talked beyond weather and grocery lines. His life was ordered in predictably alarm at 6 o'clock, coffee brewed on a timer, and the soft shuffle of his slippers against cold hardwood floors. The routine comforted him. A quiet rhythm of normalcy that never asked too much. He worked remotely as a proofreader for a legal publishing company, spending hours in silence, his only company the hum of his computer and the distant murmur of neighbors through paper-thin walls. The job wasn't exciting, but it paid the bills, and more importantly, it kept him inside. Mason had never been fond of crowds or spontaneity. He preferred the reliable silence of his rented walls, the way nothing ever changed. Evenings were for routine, too. He'd cook the same simple meals, grilled cheese, tomato soup. Sometimes Pastor and sit by the window reading second-hand novels. He wasn't lonely, at least not in a way that bothered him. Life was quiet, manageable. The only unusual detail was the wall, an odd, slightly uneven patch in the hallway, where the paint never quite dried the same. He noticed it when he first moved in, but the landlord shrugged it off as old house quirks. There was nothing ominous about it then, just a hairline crack that sometimes seemed to stretch or shrink depending on the light. Mason never paid it much attention, not really. He was too occupied with his deadlines and his books, and the comforting certainty of his daily rituals. Weekends were no different. He'd brew stronger coffee, maybe watch a documentary. Occasionally, he'd call his sister, though their conversations were short and surface level. She had a family, kids, chaos. He had his quiet house, and preferred not to share it with anyone for long. There was no tragedy in Mason's life. No dark past he was running from. Just the quiet ticking of a clock he never had to wind, and a home that always felt just a bit too still. That's what made it feel safe. But you see, that's the thing with horror, it doesn't always arrive with a bang or blood. Sometimes, it's quieter, like a whisper under floorboards, or the feeling that the air in the room has shifted just slightly, like the breath of something you can't see, waiting for you to notice it. It was a Tuesday, no, different from any other. Rain tapped gently against the windows, and Mason was finishing a brief for a dense legal manual. The house was still, filled only with the rhythm of his typing and the occasional creak of old wood settling. But somewhere around 3 p.m., he paused. Not because of a sound exactly, but because of the absence of one. The silence felt altered. Not louder or quieter. Just wrong, as if the house were holding its breath. He shook it off at first. Probably just fatigue, or too much coffee. He returned to the paragraph he'd been editing, trying to find his place, when he heard it soft, nearly imperceptible. A hiss. No, more like a breath. Long, drawn out, and strangely wet. He froze, fingers hovering over the keys. It came from the hallway, near that uneven patch on the wall. Mason didn't move for several minutes. His ears strained, but the sound didn't repeat. Maybe it had come from outside, or the pipes, or one of the neighbors. Still, something about it made his skin prickle. He got up and walked slowly, toward the hallway. The lights were dim, and that patch of wall just a hairline crack. The kind found in every old house seemed a little darker than usual, closer, like it had depth. Mason stood still, staring, then reached out and placed his palm against it, cool to the touch. Nothing unusual. He told himself it was just one of those moments, the mind playing tricks. He returned to his desk, forced himself back into the work, and convinced himself it was overthinking. But that night, while brushing his teeth, he thought he heard the breath again. Fainter this time, shorter, like someone exhaling through clenched teeth. He stood there, toothbrush in hand, listening. Nothing. Again, that was the thing. It never happened when he tried to catch it. Only when he was unguarded, walking by, doing dishes, folding laundry, always faint, always from the hallway. By Thursday, he started leaving the bathroom light on at night. Not because he was afraid, at least. That's what he told himself. But because it made the hallway look smaller, contained. It was easier to sleep when you believed the darkness had boundaries. Mason didn't speak to anyone about it. What would he say I think my wall is breathing. No, that would make it real. By the weekend, Mason had stopped walking past the hallway casually. He noticed that he'd begun adjusting his routine to avoid it. He didn't think about it consciously, at least, not at first. But instead of going to the kitchen through the hallway, he'd circle around. Instead of brushing his teeth with the bathroom door open, he'd keep it shut and locked. Small things, almost laughable. But patterns have a way of exposing truth. The crack hadn't grown, not in any measurable way, but it had changed. There was something about etan, irregularity to its edges, as though it had been carved, not formed naturally. He ran his fingers over it again one morning. The surface of the wall was cool, but the crack itself seemed ... warmer, just faintly. He pulled his hand away quickly, not sure why it unsettled him so much. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was everything. On Sunday, he invited his brother Ryan over for coffee. He didn't mention the wall, not directly, but as they chatted, Mason subtly asked, "You ever notice weird sounds in old houses? Like breathing, or creaking in strange rhythms?" Ryan laughed, shaking his head. "Dude, you need to get out more. You're working too much. It's just the house settling. Or the pipes. You know how old this place is." Mason nodded along, pretending to agree. But Ryan's words felt distant, generic, like a line pulled from a script designed to dismiss. He wanted to press further, to ask, but what if it's not the house? What if something's actually there? Instead, he just poured more coffee and changed the subject. That night, the air felt thicker. Mason sat in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to fall asleep. There was no sound from the hallway, nothing distinct, but the silence itself had weight, like a presence pressing against the edges of his awareness. Then came the scratching, not loud, not persistent, just once. A slow drag, like nails across drywall. He shot up in bed, heart racing. The sound had come from the hallway, from the wall. He grabbed a flashlight and stepped out of the bedroom. The hallway was still, the air unnaturally cold. He moved closer to the crack. It looked the same, but as he shined the light on it, he noticed something new, an indentation, just beneath it, like the beginning of a set. The following Tuesday was when it all broke open, figuratively first. Then, nearly literally, Mason had taken to wearing headphones while working. Not to listen to music, but to muffle the odd moments when the silence of the house twisted itself into unfamiliar shapes. The wall had become an unspoken fixation. He avoided looking at it, yet found himself glancing over his shoulder every half hour, half expecting to see it pulsing or shifting in some subtle, unprovable way. That morning, a flicker on the hallway motion detector app caught his eye. Mason had installed the tiny camera facing the crack after a sleepless night. He told himself it was for peace of mind, just in case someone broke in. But deep down he wanted evidence. Proof that he wasn't slipping. He tapped on the app. The footage was grainy, but clear enough. At 3:17 a.m., the sensor triggered. The hallway, dimly lit by the nightlight near the floor, appeared empty until it didn't. For a full 2 seconds, a black blur flickered across the frame. No shape, no definition, just motion. As if something large passed between the wall and the camera. Too fast or too wrong to register clearly. Mason froze. He replayed it again and again. It wasn't a trick of the light. Something had moved by. Noon, he'd stopped working entirely. He sat on the hallway floor, staring at the crack, the camera still rolling. The longer he looked, the more he felt it, a presence, not physical, not exactly, but unmistakably there. A kind of pressure, like a storm forming just beyond hearing. And then the sound returned, this time clear, and horribly deliberate. A dragging inhale, it came from the wall. Mason jerked backward, heart pounding. The breath was followed by a second sound, this one impossible to rationalize. A slow tapping, like fingers, from inside the wall. Not random, not like pipes. A rhythm, for taps. A pause, then 3. He scrambled to his feet, grabbed his phone, and filmed it. But the moment he hit record, silence returned. The wall was still again, the crack unchanged. yet his hands trembled. Later that evening, as he re-watched the hallway footage obsessively, the second indentation beneath the original crack was now unmistakable. A second line, almost like an eye socket, or something trying to shape itself into a face. Mason didn't sleep that night. The next morning, the wall bled, just a drop, rust-colored. Mason no longer followed a routine. Work deadlines passed unanswered. Calls from his boss and sister piled up. Meals were skipped, or burned, or forgotten altogether. The house had become a container of dread, and every hour inside it deepened. The feeling that he was living beside something alive or worse, within it. The wall had changed again. He couldn't prove it to anyone else, but it was undeniable to him. The crack had grown not longer, but deeper, more dimensional. The second indentation now curved downward, and a third one had emerged, forming an arc above the first. It no longer resembled damage. It resembled a shape, a pattern, an expression. He began researching forums, subreddits, blogs, filled with grainy images and paranoid speculation. Breathing walls, old spirits, liminal hauntings. Most were filled with nonsense. But every now and then, he'd find a line that felt too specific. They knock in patterns. They show you a face, so you'll start listening. One post ended with, "It's not the house. It's what watches you from beneath it." Mason printed that one out and pinned it above his desk. He stopped. Sleeping every night, the wall would breathe. Sometimes once, sometimes for minutes. Other nights, it knocked not loud enough to wake the neighbors, but enough to make his skin crawl. Always in the same rhythm. 4. Pause. 3. He began to wonder if it was trying to communicate. He set up 2 cameras. Then 4, then a microphone. Each time he'd play the footage back, but it would glitch. Always at the same moment, 3:17 a.m., the screen would flicker. Audio would warp. The files corrupted themselves. His reflection began to disturb him. In the mirror, he looked gaunt, eyes bloodshot, face pale. But it was something else. A delay. He swore once, just once he turned his head. And the reflection moved after him. By the 3rd week, Mason stopped opening the blinds. Light felt wrong, like it didn't belong anymore. The house preferred the dark. He felt watched during the day, but accompanied at night. He tried leaving once. Packed a small bag, opened the front door, but the air outside hit him like a wall. He couldn't breathe. His chest tightened, his vision blurred. He collapsed onto the floor. And then, the tapping started again. 4. Pause. 3. He crawled back to the hallway, where the wall waited. Mason no longer followed a routine. Work deadlines passed unanswered. Calls from his boss and sister piled up. Meals were skipped, or burned, or forgotten altogether. The house had become a container of dread, and every hour inside it deepened. The feeling that he was living beside something alive or worse, within it. The wall had changed again. He couldn't prove it to anyone else, but it was undeniable to him. The crack had grown not longer, but deeper, more dimensional. The second indentation now curved downward, and a third one had emerged, forming an arc above the first. It no longer resembled damage. It resembled a shape, a pattern, an expression. He began researching forums, subreddits, blogs, filled with grainy images and paranoid speculation. Breathing walls, old spirits, liminal hauntings. Most were filled with nonsense. But every now and then, he'd find a line that felt too specific. They knock in patterns. They show you a face, so you'll start listening. One post ended with, "It's not the house. It's what watches you from beneath it." Mason printed that one out and pinned it above his desk. He stopped. Sleeping every night, the wall would breathe. Sometimes once, sometimes for minutes. Other nights, it knocked not loud enough to wake the neighbors, but enough to make his skin crawl. Always in the same rhythm. 4. Pause. 3. He began to wonder if it was trying to communicate. He set up 2 cameras. Then 4, then a microphone. Each time he'd play the footage back, but it would glitch. Always at the same moment, 3:17 a.m., the screen would flicker. Audio would warp. The files corrupted themselves. His reflection began to disturb him. In the mirror, he looked gaunt, eyes bloodshot, face pale. But it was something else. A delay. He swore once, just once he turned his head. And the reflection moved after him. By the third week, Mason stopped opening the blinds. Light felt wrong, like it didn't belong anymore. The house preferred the dark. He felt watched during the day, but accompanied at night. He tried leaving once. Packed a small bag, opened the front door, but the air outside hit him like a wall. He couldn't breathe. His chest tightened, his vision blurred. He collapsed onto the floor. And then, the tapping started again. 4. Pause. 3. He crawled back to the hallway, where the wall waited. His phone lit up, with another missed call from his sister. Mason didn't answer. The next morning, the hallway was silent. Sunlight bled weakly through the edges of the blinds, illuminating the dust floating in the still air. The house looked unchanged, ordinary. Even the walls stood where they always had. The floor creaked, in familiar tones, but Mason was gone. No blood, no struggle, just absence. His phone lay on the kitchen counter, screen lit with missed calls. Coffee grounds still sat in the filter, dried and forgotten. The cameras were powered off, files corrupted. Only the hallway remained curiously pristine, almost as if it had been cleaned, scrubbed. His sister Olivia arrived that evening. She hadn't heard from him in days. She let herself in with the spare key under the planter. The living room was untouched. The hallway lights flickered once when she passed, but she thought nothing of it. Mason was always complaining about the wiring. She walked the house calling his name. Her voice echoed. It wasn't until she reached the hallway that she felt it shift in the air, cold, subtle, as if something had just passed by and vanished. Around a corner she paused in front of the wall. The crack was gone, no trace of damage, no indentation, just smooth, fresh paint, too fresh. A shade brighter than the rest of the hallway, as though someone had patched something and tried poorly to match it. Olivia tilted her head. Something in the wall seemed off, not visible, but present. She leaned closer, and for just a moment to brief to be sure she saw it. A faint outline beneath the surface, not a crack. Not anymore. A face. Her heart skipped. She blinked, and it was gone. She told herself it was nothing, just a trick of shadow and nerves. She left a note on the kitchen table, promising to return the next day, but she walked faster on her way out. She didn't look back. That night, in the hallway, the light turned on by itself, and somewhere behind the wall, something breathed, not loud, but waiting, watching. Mason was never found. Over time, his case faded from attention. A few articles, a thread on Reddit, a missing persons flyer that stayed taped to a streetlight long after the ink had blurred from rain, but the house was never sold. And those who passed by said they could feel something through the windows, something watching, and if you listen long enough at night, they say you can hear the tap